It is a really hard industry to navigate because it's so fluid. Certainly Michael Goy he was definitely instrumental for me. One thing that he told me that has always stuck with me is you'll end up shooting more of what you're shooting now. What you're doing is how people think of you. Yeah. Oh, that person does that. Mm-hmm. And so then that's what comes, right? And we talk about such things and all kinds, it's like the law of attraction. And people have all kinds of different ways of talking about the same idea, but it is true, and especially as someone who has a varied skill set and is adaptable, you also have to think about, okay, I can do these broad range of things, but what do I want to do? Mm-hmm. And eventually narrow at least until you get to a point where you can add one more thing, right? And so it's like, it's not to say that you have to limit yourself forever, but you have to create a lane and then kind of add more lanes to your highway.
Yeah. Scene is not just a podcast. It is a movement dedicated to amplifying the voices, experiences, and stories of women shaping the film and photography industries. We're going to dive deep into the soul work that these women undertake every day to pursue their dreams, passions, and to breathe life into their creativity. And all while fostering and nurturing a thriving community among women in our field. I'm Nalani Hernandez Melo, a creative photographer, director, and curator based in Los Angeles, and I am deeply honored to share this space with you as your host and creator of Scene, where women behind the lens take center stage. I am honored to welcome Leonora Anzaldua, a visionary Chicana filmmaker, whose work is dedicated to amplifying underrepresented voices. Hailing from San Diego, Leonora's creative journey began with her undergraduate studies at Yale University and continued with an MFA from USC School of Cinematic Arts. As a writer, director, and cinematographer, her work spans narrative, documentary, and branded content, bringing forth stories that resonate deeply. Leonora's exceptional talent has earned her prestigious accolades, including the Sun Cinematography Award and the ASC Vision Scholarship. Mentored by cinematographer Michael Goy, ASC, Leonora has worked in his camera department on American Horror Story Asylum. Her short films have been widely recognized with screenings at festivals and nominations for a Student Emmy, a Student Academy Award, and Imagine Award. Currently, Leonora is developing an exciting, magical, realist kids adventure film, along with several episodic projects, further expanding her distinctive voice in this industry. I am thrilled to have you with me today to explore the power of storytelling and your incredible contributions to film. Welcome, Leonora.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course. How are you today?
I'm excited.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love to always begin with a little grounding icebreaker question, which is, how is the body, the mind, and the spirit today?
Oh my goodness. All over the place.
Ice broken. Shattered.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a moment there. How have you arrived today?
There's just, I think as always, so much going on. Life is so fluid and things change constantly. And I feel like that is like the perennial lesson of adult life is nothing's ever the same. So
ever changing.
As ever, I'm being challenged to adapt.
Amazing. And today, how do you think you're navigating adapting?
I think a little bit better than yesterday. Okay. So I think that's the best we can do, right? Trying to breathe and just take a deep breath and let go of disappointments and take lessons. So.
Beautiful. There's a certain way I ask this question to almost all guests, but with you in particular, I had it this way. Leonora, do you remember the first time, and I mean the exact moment, when you were moved by an image or a moving image?
I don't remember the exact moment. I remember that as a very young child, I was from the time I was a toddler, I was 2 or 3. I was fortunate that my mom was able to spend a lot of time with me until my little brother was born when I was 2, that I got to spend a lot of time with her. My dad was in graduate school, and we would go to museums when I was little, and art museums were my favorite. And I, it was probably 3 or 4, and we would go. I would ask to go to the art museum, and then I would stand forever at the paintings, and my mom would be so bored. My poor mom. And I was, just a tiny kid, and it was like abstract art. It was like shapes and colors on canvas, and it was the kind of thing that was like, it's hard for a lot of people really to get into, because it's not figurative in a way, it's not scenes, it's not portraits.
There's no exact narrative.
I was the slowest person in our family / groups that we went to the museums with, because I just loved the paintings. I loved looking at them. I was fascinated by the shapes and the colors and how they worked together. And I always joke that I became a photographer because I'm not a good illustrator. I could never like draw the way I wanted to.
I can relate to that.
So, and I can draw things, but I can't control how it comes out, right? So everything I draw looks kind of cartoonish, and it's fine. I just don't have the skill set of an illustrator or a painter to control my style in that way. And I think as a younger child, I sort of bought into the idea of natural talent more than I do now. And so I thought I'm not good at drawing. I didn't think I need to practice drawing and learn the principles of drawing. And so I just kind of would get frustrated that I couldn't make it look like what I wanted to. And then as I got a bit older, I began to really love photo exhibits. Maybe like I was a gymnast as a kid, and we performed at the county fair every year, and that came with free admission to the county fair. So we got to go around the fair. And my favorite thing, one of my 2 favorite things to do was to go to the photography exhibit at the fair. And I was, 7, 8, 9, and I would go through the photography exhibit and the gem and mineral exhibit. Those were the things that I really liked. And so that's when I became a bit more interested in film and, film, the medium, not motion picture. And I became really interested in especially lighting. There was always a pretty extensive black and white exhibit, and I just became really interested in like the lights and darks and the way that they showed up, and seeing people manipulate light became really interesting to me. And then when I was about 12, I learned to use a manual SLR, and then about 2 years later, I learned to process my film and print it. And there were not digital cameras at this time. So that wasn't an option.
You had to learn.
You did have to.
No workaround.
To do the plastic and the chemicals.
But still 14, right?
Yes, I was 14.
That's still amazing.
And so I just really enjoyed it. I loved the process, the tactile nature, the smell, the chemistry, and then before I went to college, the photography process. And you know, I did actually do other types of art. I kind of just was a creator as a kid. And even when I was bored, again, this was before the internet. So, you know, you had to think of things to do when you were bored instead of just scrolling. And I would come up with art projects for myself to do all the time. My mom, by this point, was working as a computer operator in a computer room, and she did a lot of printer support. So she would have leftover printer boxes, you know,
the ones that had the top and the
they
bottom.
Have a lid.
Yeah.
And so I would cut out a hole in the narrow side of the box and sit in it. I would stick my feet out, and then I would cut slits in the lid and turn it perpendicular to the box so that I could make myself a little desk. And so I would sit in the box drawing. I would make my little art projects that I came up with. And I would decorate the box so it had its own character to it. And I did like needlepoint and cross stitch. And as I got older, I learned to screen print and do lithography. And I really enjoyed all of those creative pursuits a lot. And then by the time I was in college, I actually started to think about art as a medium for expression of ideas and emotions and thoughts.
And you studied photography at Yale, right?
I studied American Studies. I did a photography senior thesis project.
Okay.
I actually was planning to be a physics major when I started.
Wow.
So I did 2 years as a physics major, and then realized I was spending so much of my time on problem sets that I was sort of losing some of the broader opportunities that are really special about being in a place like that.
Okay.
And I had a pretty big sort of wake-up call moment when Kofi Annan came to speak. And if anybody doesn't know, he was the Secretary General of the UN when I was a kid, and for quite a long time, a global leader. And he came to our school to speak, and I didn't go because I had too many problem sets. And then I thought about it later, and I thought, this is like the wrong priority. I can do problem sets anywhere.
Yeah.
I can't hear Kofi Annan anywhere. And these are the kinds of opportunities that won't come again in my life, and that I should take advantage of while I'm here in this special place. And so as a result of that, I reevaluated my goals, and I looked at what I really wanted to be doing. And I realized that the semesters that I was happy were those when I was in a photography class. And so I considered trying to switch to a BFA in photography. However, I like looked at the requirements and didn't, they had a sophomore portfolio review that I had missed, and I didn't really, I just like kind of let myself get scared by administrative and policy things and didn't, because of the background that I came from, didn't think to ask for an exception because I wasn't used to people making exceptions. And I found out later that they do make exceptions, but I just sort of decided that I couldn't do it, so I had to figure something else out. And at that point, I had taken a lot of American Studies classes. I had taken a Mexican American Studies class and several African American Studies classes, and a couple, maybe one or two other classes that fit into that that major, just because I was interested in them. And so I thought, okay, well, here's something that I'm already well set up to major in. And so I shifted there. And then I ended up switching my studies to race and gender representation in U.S. mass media. And so that was a way for me to still dig into the things I was interested in photography.
Integrate it.
And then I did my thesis project as self-portraits as me as Latina celebrities, and looked at how they were represented, and what that, I guess it's started from a personal relationship to their representation, sort of how I felt that did or did not, and mostly did not reflect something that I could relate to.
Yeah.
Sort of the celebrity commodification and the way that the kinds of characters that they were cast in, and the tension that I felt with those characters. But then I also became interested in what it must have been like for the people to be sort of packaged as celebrities in the way that they were, and what the personal toll of that was, especially for someone like Lupe Velez, who was a silent film star who ended up dying by suicide. Carmen Miranda, who, it took the celebrity took a huge toll on her and impacted her health and overall wellness pretty profoundly because of her need to use stimulants and depressants in order to get through her schedule and keep herself going. I became quite interested in the human stories, and then also the sociopolitical environments during which the people were famous, and sort of how that impacted the way that they were represented and the way that they were talked about, and also just the way that Latinos in the U.S. were presented in general, also during different periods.
Well, this brings up a question, and actually another thing that I wrote down of curiosity of you as a Latina at Yale in a white space.
I did ballet folklorico, and ballet was a really tight-knit community, and that was really helpful for me to have that group. And the group itself was very tight-knit, and so was the Latino community. And I was there at a time when the cultural centers actually merged. There had been the Chicano Cultural Center and the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, and the students wanted to create a space that was more inclusive for all Latino students. And so, and obviously anybody else who wanted to come. But it was very helpful for me to have that community of people who had more similar experiences, who were dealing with some of the same cultural challenges and shifts. I mean, down to things like how do you dress for the winter? Especially when you're walking you don't have a car, you're outside. I mean, we didn't understand wool sweaters and down coats. We grew up in Arizona and California, so there were just a lot of the difficult transition things that we had in common, and having a core group of people who sort of shared my understanding of how strange this was and how different it was, and also we could help each other through the things that were difficult about that, meant that I was much more able to enjoy the exposure to people who did have such different experiences. I had my group of people that were we could look at each other and be like, this is crazy, right? Yeah. And then, nod, and then, okay, I'm not losing my mind. This is a bizarre experience, whatever it may be, just something that's way outside of our class and cultural background.
Culture shock.
Yes. This is weird, right? Yeah. Okay, great. Whereas other people didn't think it was, they were in a culture that was more consistent. And I think it's a gift, to have that experience, to be able to see a completely different culture that's so different from your background, and to begin to understand how different people's lives are in different parts of the world, and different sort of spaces, different communities, different classes. Yeah. It's really, I am very, very grateful for it. I'm grateful for all of the amazing, brilliant people that I met. And I was just much more able to appreciate that and learn the lessons from them. Some of the most, I think, useful lessons of my life have come from the people who were from totally different backgrounds, right? Even down to ask someone to make an exception for you, right? I mean, a lot of the people that I was there with, it never occurred to them that no one would make an exception.
And like you named it. It's a cultural thing. You don't ask for too much.
I mean, there's also the lesson of like how much you can accomplish if you don't fear failure.
Yeah.
You know, it's remarkable. And for those of us where failure is has real extreme consequences,
yes.
it can sound reductive to say, oh, well, just don't worry about failure, right? If failure has severe consequences for you,
there is no backup. There is no
There's no one to save you if you're, you start a business and it fails.
Exactly.
There's that's real. So I'm not saying that's not, and it's an important consideration, but it's also astounding to me to watch people who are so talented and smart and brilliant, and they never imagine that they will fail. And certainly part of that comes from knowing they have a safety net.
Yes.
They have a community, they have resources. Yeah, it's not the end of the world if they do, but what tremendous success comes from being able to jump into something without fear and putting their full focus and all of their brilliance into it without worrying about what if it doesn't work. That's a very helpful lesson for me as a worrier.
A natural worrier. Yes. Anxious worrier. Worst case scenario first.
Like, think about those people, right? Like they inspire me. They do.
They exist.
It's inspiring to watch them. Friends who have started very successful, very creative businesses. Schools. I have a friend who founded a really remarkable school in India, just all kinds of very, very interesting, inspiring, wonderful things. And it's so cool to just see what they can do, and also to think, okay, if I believe in myself, I can too,
I mean, mindset.
Yes.
Your limiting beliefs. Some of the baggage you're carrying isn't even fully yours. Is you're carrying 7 generations.
I know, it's so remarkable. I mean, even what people are discovering about the actual physical cell structure differences that come from, it's incredible. It blows my mind. The epigenetics kind of stuff is so fascinating.
My relationship to spirituality really changed when I looked towards or started finding where science and spirituality cross, where there's research being shown and really testing these things that I would consider ancient knowledge and traditions, but our modern civilization needs proof. Right. Yeah. And so, there are institutions like Yale or Harvard now actually really implementing okay, what about meditation, mindfulness, and the effects and just seeing that come to surface now that we live in such a digital age and people can really read that. But as someone who is more connected to the ancestral practices from a lineage and culture, it's, my relationship shifted to a way of now I have more resources to make it more accessible to those that are curious or to those who want to understand, but they're still very taboo. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see it all. Integrate.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Tell me more about how we go from Yale, American Studies and photography to you ended up deciding to go to USC, and cinema now. Yeah.
It started with theater a little bit.
Okay.
It was kind of and it sort of the nature of my self-portraits too. They're very theatrical. It was me as these characters, in some cases recreating images that already existed. And because I was doing those, because of the nature of the project that I was doing, one thing happened, which is my friend Rosana, Rosana Garcia, who's an incredible playwright and director. She decided she had written a play set in Puerto Rico, and she decided that it would be easier to teach her friends who spoke Spanish to act than to teach her friends who acted to speak Spanish. So she got a bunch of us together and decided to teach us acting.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun. I just loved it. I was, I remember distinctly one day coming back from a rehearsal and feeling very anxious, and I couldn't figure out why I was like feeling so anxious and stressed out, and I couldn't really identify anything. And then I realized that it wasn't me; it was my character's anxiety, and I was like, "Oh, I got to work on that." But it was really interesting just to dive into sort of improvisational backstory work, figuring out the relationships between the characters that weren't necessarily in the text. We came up with stuff that just, the synergy and the magic of that, where you like just spontaneously find these like formative moments in the relationships of the characters that exist outside of the actual narrative that you're telling, but are central to the narrative that you're telling, and the fact that you can like discover them as a collaborative process and nobody's dictating. It's this thing that's just, it just is, it's the truth. There's some kind of like fundamental truth to it that it's like, of course, this is exactly what these characters' relationship is, because we all kind of discovered it together, and it's not like any one of us created it. We found it. It was within the text, but also not written.
That's what I love about theater.
Yeah, it was just so much fun. And, she did all kinds of very cool activities with us. And so I really loved it. I discovered that I loved that. And then the other thing that happened was that at the end of my junior year, I had already decided on my senior thesis project. But because of the self-portraits that I was doing, my photography teacher, in a critique, actually the final critique, maybe it was either the final critique or the midterm critique, said to me that he thought that, he thought I was actually really figuring out what I was doing with these self-portraits, and that he thought it was the wrong medium, that it should be a film because of the things that I was engaging with. And it made so much sense. Yeah. But it had never occurred to me before. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a great idea. But I didn't have time to take a filmmaking class because I was already doing photo and, 2 studio art classes like that. Like it just wouldn't have.
Just didn't align.
I wouldn't have been a full-time student because they would have taken up my entire life. So I just pinned the idea to explore filmmaking later. And I did, several years after I graduated, I took an intro filmmaking class, and I found it to be just incredibly fun. I was lucky to have a group of really like just sensitive, creative souls that I got assigned to make a sweet little film with. And we didn't really know what we were doing, but we figured it out. And it was, for me, it was really exciting in the way that theater is. It's so collaborative, and also incorporates cameras. It's just like all these things that I just really love to do, and like really, I guess like I felt like the thing that I was like meant for. I loved it. Our little short film got nominated for a student Emmy, and I had no idea what that meant. And I was like, oh, cool.
Great.
Because it was a school that, it was a junior college, but it was a school that has a big radio television program. They put a lot of effort into that. So they submit projects to this, whatever, I guess it's called the College Television Awards now or something. But anyway, they submit every year for their students. So I hadn't even submitted, and so they submitted on our behalf, and we got a nomination, and then years later, when I was like an MFA candidate at USC, I couldn't get a nomination for that. I was just like, these movies that I'm making now are like so much harder, and I know what I'm doing, but but it was, yeah, I was oblivious, but I was like, oh great, that's nice. But it was a sweet little film, and we had a great time, and I didn't know that I was, a lot of what I was doing in it was directing, because I didn't know how the roles broke down. We did have people who didn't know who didn't have any acting experience and didn't really know what was expected of them in part of the film. And there were 3 little vignettes that it was made up of, and one of the vignettes was people who had no training or acting background, and so I helped them understand what they were supposed to do.
AKA directing.
And had a great time doing that. And then thought, and that project was, the project of taking that class was to decide if I wanted to do an MFA in filmmaking or photography. And I just loved it. And I said, yes, this is what I want to do. I feel like I'm meant for this. And so then I applied to graduate school for filmmaking.
Was that class also a way of, logic mind, testing out before taking the risk?
Yes, because, well, it seems silly to me I mean, I don't know if it was like so much of a worrier, but more of a like understanding that I didn't, like some random person told me I should do this, but I didn't actually know if I would like it in practice. Yeah. I really fell into filmmaking. It's interesting because most of the people that I talk to are like, I always knew I wanted to do this. And that's not my experience at all. I never knew I wanted to do this until I like stumbled into it. And I was like, hey, this is all the things I love.
Yeah.
And so I don't think of myself as a cinephile in a way that like a lot of my colleagues do. I actually work in a pretty different way in terms of, visual inspiration.
I get artists from you. Artists.
I almost never pull from movies as visual inspiration for movies. It's almost always paintings and photographers because that's sort of where I come from. So I just sort of found this thing that fit really well as a craft. I think not even as a business, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Like the way that the studio system works is much more
I would even invite like to take
siloed?
To one step further. I think for you wasn't just a craft, it was a medium. Artist, and your paintbrush is
right. I mean, that's exactly how it ended up coming about. My teacher was like, "This seems like it fits this other medium," and
wrong brush you're holding.
And that's like
you're close.
Yeah, that's a prescient observation because like it's also similar to just like what I was as a kid, right? I was like, oh, like I'm gonna come up with this little project or that little project, and I cross stitch. This is cool. Can I learn to knit? I'm very much driven by the things that I want to make. And in a way, the project-based sort of approach of the Yale School of Art was a very good fit for me in that way, because the way that they at that time, I'm not sure if it's still the same, but at that time, the way that they guide students through learning about art is through projects that they're interested in. And so the idea of what you're doing and what you're trying to say is what drives it.
So it's like conceptual based, starting at your idea.
And then like learning the technical that you need in order to execute whatever you want to do.
And best communicate that idea
right,
too.
like the photography classes at that time were beginning, intermediate, and advanced.
Yeah.
And that's
it.
And it was like, okay, you're in intermediate. You want to like do 4x5. They'll bring out a 4x5 and everybody in the class learns 4x5 because one person wants to do 4x5, right? Or like somebody wants to use strobes. So the class will get a lesson in strobes because somebody wants to use them and they need to use them they need to know how to use them in order to check them out from the equipment cage, And so it was very much like the technical knowledge. I mean, obviously, like everybody learned to like, develop a roll of black and white and print. But beyond that, I mean, even like learning to print color, that was because somebody, maybe me, I don't know, somebody in my intermediate class wanted to work in color. And so then we learned to print color, and there was a whole class on that. And so
wow, that's an amazing. And it was one professor or different
professors, all of them worked that way.
That's
amazing.
That's like a very tying back to the way we even started, like thinking of the collective. We're gonna nurture everyone's interest and everyone's best interest, and but when we're tending to this, we're tending to the collective. So you're all everyone learns
because of one person.
Exactly.
And I definitely, every time I've taught photography a couple of times, and when I have students, I mean, I even with teenagers, younger high school students, I really encourage them to dig into projects, because you'll learn things that you didn't set out to learn technically. If you think like, I'm going to learn the technical of photography, there's a certain amount that you'll learn. But if you say, I want to photograph bees in my backyard, you develop an expertise by problem solving things that you couldn't anticipate wanting to have learned. But then this particular thing, whatever it is, brings up sort of different challenges that then you have to solve. And that's how I became really interested in miniatures, because I was, doing self-portraits as a college student, as a broke college student, of myself as very wealthy celebrities.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford the locations that I needed. And so I would build like dioramas and then photograph those and then composite myself into them.
Crazy.
Because
that's
it was just out of need, and I think like when you start looking at a project, you discover needs. And then, I mean, and every movie is that way too. And that's what I get so into when I read a script. It's like, oh, here's a problem that we need to solve, I mean, our friend Karina, who is off camera right now, wrote a script in which a person needed to like come out of a wall, right? It's like, how do we do that? How do we make a person come out of a wall? It is such an interesting challenge, right? Like, how do you have a person like mold in and out of a wall and feel like somebody's like coming out of it or getting sucked into it? Like, what does that look like? And how do you actually accomplish that and make it feel real?
Limited resources.
Right. Yeah. And also, I mean, that's one of the most exciting things to me about cameras too, is like the ability to make things seem real even when they're not.
I remember when I was learning film and studying film, when it came to class about cinematography, the sleight of hand, illusions, the what's that expression in magic, like the smoke and mirrors, and it's glass cinematography is the magic of perception and manipulating the eye through smoke and mirrors. And I love that, and I think I would love to learn a little bit. There's a couple things I wanted to touch on. One is community sounds like it's a big anchor for you, finding community, but also mentorship. You've mentioned professors and in your community. As you journeyed from schooling into the professional sphere, was mentorship a key element to growing now that you're out in the field?
That's a good question. It is a really hard industry to navigate because it's so fluid.
Yes.
Right? Nobody actually does it the same way.
There's no actual manual to this.
Right. It's not like you go to law school and you take the bar and then you like interview at law firms, right? It's everybody's path is different, and yet there are similarities in terms of sort of how one can carve a path and create a career. And certainly Michael Goy was he was definitely instrumental for me in terms of helping me understand some of the unspoken rules or not rules, I guess.
yeah.
You know, I mean, I think one thing that he told me that has always stuck with me is you'll end up shooting more of what you're shooting now. So you have to make the kind of work that you want to be making.
Yes.
And that always it's that people think of it, you know, it's like people, what you're doing is how people think of you.
Yeah.
Oh, that person does that. And so then that's what comes, right? And it's, I mean, we talk about such things and all kinds, you know, it's like the law of attraction. And people have all kinds of different ways of talking about the same idea, but it is true, you know, and especially as someone who has a varied skill set and is adaptable, you also have to think about, okay, I can do these broad range of things, but what do I want to do? And eventually narrow at least until you get to a point where you can add one more thing, right? And so it's like, it's not to say that you have to limit yourself forever, but you have to create a lane and then kind of add more lanes to your highway.
Yeah. One piece
Eventually you have a highway, but first you have to start with a 1-lane road.
First it's just a dirt road.
Right. It's like dirt, and then you like kind of,
there's going to be lots of forks. You got to decide.
Yeah. And he was also really helpful for me in terms of helping me ask the questions, learn the things that I didn't know, if that makes sense. Because I think I have I always admire people who can ask questions in abstract.
Yeah.
You know? Because I'm kind of, I don't necessarily, you know, when they say, you know, you get like a kind of abstract intro to something and people ask for like, does anybody have any questions? I'm kind of like, well, no, we'll see when they come, you know, but they're not here now. It's like they more come up as I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so he's always been very helpful in terms of when he will introduce me to people. He'll ask if I have any questions for them. And of course I don't, because I don't know what I should be asking. And then he'll ask questions that he thinks might be helpful, you know? And so it's like being the question asker that gives me useful information that I can take is like, that's like a kind of a maybe a way that people wouldn't always think of how someone can support you.
Absolutely.
But it is actually incredibly helpful because especially with an industry where it isn't so like concrete what all the sort of, I don't want to say rules, but maybe like inner workings are, like what you understand and don't understand if you don't come from a community where other people do this kind of work. Even if you, I mean, even just being an artist as a career in general is just so broad and so honestly scary. And there are things that if you don't have people who already know how to do it, you just don't know. And you even don't know what you don't know because you don't have the context. And so I think in that way, that's been very important to me. And one of the things that I love about especially cinematography, I think filmmaking in general is like this, but there is a culture of mentorship. There is a call up your friend and ask a question. I mean, it's peer-to-peer mentorship and it's, you know, I don't know what asymmetrical experience mentorship, both, right? But there is a culture of helping each other out, you know, helping answer questions, sharing information. I did this camera test, I found this. I need to solve this problem that I've never solved before, but you had to do a similar thing on this other shoot. Can I ask you how you guys approached it? I love learning and I love helping people learn and seeing people grow. And it's so interesting to see a like smart, talented person grow in skill and see how their work evolves and what they contribute to the world. And it's like, it's really exciting to me to also to like help someone else understand. I think something that's probably kind of unusual about me is that I find the knowledge of how things work so interesting that I try to teach people about it. You know, it's like if I have directors that I work with, I try to like help them understand more and more about like what the camera is doing and how the camera works, and, you know, share that information about one, so that they understand what the task is that we're trying to accomplish, especially with tricky shots, but two, so that they become more empowered themselves and can better communicate with their teams. You know, if you understand at least the like range of focal length you want in the lens, like that becomes a shorthand that's easier, right, than just like having to draw a picture or having to find a picture that looks like, right,
what you want, like a reference.
Right. If the director is able to say, oh, I want a close up on a 35 instead of a 50, the cinematographer immediately knows what that means, instead of having the cinematographer set up the close up on or an 85, right? And then you're like, no, that's not right. That's not what I want. How are we getting there? Whereas the director understands already those things. And of course, like the cinematographer's job is to pull that out of them. But also if they're then empowered with the technical knowledge themselves and they're able to communicate more efficiently, not just with you, but anybody else that they happen to be working with in the future. And that's a gift, you know? So, and I just like it so much. I like teaching people about it, you know? It's just like, it's fun. It's like, it's fun to see people like gain the knowledge, gain the facility, and then get excited about what they're able to create with the knowledge, you know? And also become passionate about something that I am passionate about.
Like
and I just enjoy that, you
sharing
know?
The wisdom, sharing
you
the
know,
creativity.
and the love for something. Like it's a very similar culture in gymnastics, you know. It doesn't matter if somebody is like learning a double layout or learning a cartwheel. Like everybody's excited for them when they learn, you know. And it's like if it's a struggle and they overcome a challenge and they progress, like you'll hear the whole like gym cheering for like a 60-year-old who did a cartwheel for the first time in their lives, because like it's progress, it's people learning, it's also people like sharing a love of something, you know, which is, I just think is so beautiful. It's like one of the best things in life is to be able to share something that you love with someone else and have them like
resonate with it. And continues the cycle and exchange of love. And like, you know, love doesn't have to be just in the romantic sense. It's just that passion and draw for something or someone, and to share that. It's our human innate, you know, condition. To connect and to love. Is there something you wish you had known, or you wish someone had told you before you pursued this, that you can now share with someone?
One thing that I hear a lot from people interested in filmmaking, and that I didn't know was like how one gets started, especially in the crafts. A lot of the starting out advice will be, try to be an assistant, try to get a job in a mailroom, get to know people, meet people, which works for some segments of the business, but that's the entryway. That's a way to maybe develop relationships that could get people interested in your work as a writer, or get you into an agency, or
another way I would say like that's
model.
Like the practical,
right?
But what is the inner?
Right. It's more of like the kind of, I guess, a business side, which isn't to say that the business isn't creative or artistic, because obviously like writing, you know, professional writers are also within that world. But if you're talking about, you know, art direction, cinematography, production design, even directing, there isn't that kind of advice for that. There's not a like, you know, and a lot of times the advice is just make stuff, which is true. But I would say like make stuff with people that you work well with, that you communicate well with, that you can learn from. And ideally you're learning from each other. But a very practical thing that I wish I had known is that you can learn so much by volunteering on advanced student productions. And some of them work the way, they're smaller, they have fewer resources, but some thesis films, especially at the bigger film schools, really do run very efficiently. They run very professionally. And you can learn a lot about the different roles and what roles you like by showing up. And you can also meet people who are early career, but maybe just a little bit ahead of you, who will start inviting you for paid work if you show up and do a good job and they feel supported by you. And so volunteering for those kinds of things, figuring out, you can find out like through the film school offices and like who's in need of crew and kind of say like I'm available. And even some of my crew from my thesis film came that way. The other recommendation that I have is don't overcommit, don't over volunteer and see if it's a place where what you're getting out of is the learning experience. Because there's a range and for filmmaking in general, there's a huge range of the kinds of sets that there are. And some of them are incredibly nurturing and very, very instructive and really helpful. And there should be symbiosis. There should be mutual benefit. And if you're showing up and volunteering to help, you should get something out of it. And that is learning. So if you're volunteering to help and people are taking the time to teach you things and they do know what they're doing and you're growing and you're learning from them, great. They'll always take more help. But if you're not, you can say, thanks so much, and like, good luck with the rest of your shoot, and that way, you should just because you're volunteering doesn't mean that you need to commit to a situation where you're not benefiting. And so that volunteering is great. It can help establish early career connections. It can help you get paid work. I learned a tremendous amount volunteering on sets when I was in graduate school, at least as much as I learned in class, probably more. But that was learning from my peers. That was learning from people who were just a few years older than I was. And it's so much fun to learn in that way. And if you're on a set that has a 30-person crew, you can imagine how it might build out at a 50-person crew or a 100-person crew. It really gives you a sense of how things run and where you're a good fit. And even if you want to be a director, I think it's advisable to do that because it makes you able to understand what everybody that's helping you on your projects is doing, what their roles are, I do think you should work in most every role if you can. Certainly you should be a PA. Probably you should do electric and camera. There's you should probably run props. You should know what everybody's job is so that when you're organizing yourself and when you're organizing your shoot and when you're trying to think about how best to accomplish what you want to accomplish, you actually are doing that with knowledge, but also it helps you better support everybody that's there to help you. And if you understand their jobs and you understand what they're doing, at least in an abstract, you're not going to you're hiring these people or you're working with these people because they have greater expertise than you do. But if you understand the nuts and bolts of what they're dealing with, then you can support them more effectively. And the little ways that you can make their lives better. One of my favorite tricks is if you have a shoot, especially an outdoor shoot on an oppressively hot day, do a run for popsicles. Everybody, Otter Pops, it's so easy. Everybody who's sweating, who's working so hard, whose bodies ache, they're tired in the sun, they're so hot, somebody thought of you and brought you something cool and it's 100 degrees outside. But if you felt that feeling of like, you're the one wrangling cables, sweating, dirty, tired, sore. And it's so hot outside and somebody brought you a popsicle. Like, you know how meaningful that is. And it's so inexpensive. It's such an inexpensive way to like get people to feel like they're a part of things.
That's why crafty is important.
Right.
The quality of the crafty.
The quality of crafty is very important.
Is very important.
Yes, it's a very easy way to help people feel appreciated, feel a part of the team. And if they do feel a part of the team, they'll solve problems you never even knew existed, which is like money. Like that's when like your life is good. When everybody else cares so much about the project and feels so invested in the project that it's their project too, and they're trying to keep work off your plate. So that's my advice. It's a lot of advice and still so little, but.
Now, there's the last thing, closing question here.
Okay.
To keep us in the game of enduring the rejections, the failures, the growth, the heaviness of the world, what is one practice or, that has worked for you to keep you in the spirit of continuing this path?
For me, making work, and letting it be. And this is obviously not everyone, but for me, even if it's not a big project, like my self-portraits are like a really great way for me to re-energize myself without having to have the complexity of a whole narrative shoot. If I have a month that I can just like do a side project, conceptualizing some image that I want to make and like making the little crafts for it and like putting it together. And, they've gotten a little bit more expensive over the years. But, so it's like, if I save a little bit of money and I have the money that I can spend on them. And then I think what it is like having something small that is easier to make in a shorter time frame, because making a film, even just writing a script takes so long. It takes so much perseverance, so much endurance, financing it, like getting all of the pieces to come together is so hard. Every film is trying to fall apart at every moment. And it's really just like, a Sisyphean task to get it
like a house
to
of
the
cards.
end. Yeah. And it's just like, and when the wind is blowing, like trying to build a house of cards in a windstorm, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, like you putting up your flags and try to, and it's really, really difficult. And like any film project getting finished at all is a miracle. And so having something that is a little bit less difficult that still like brings that joy of creativity, to like give me little bursts of excitement, is really helpful for me.
It's like remove the pressure of it having to be sometimes a job or pressure of execution, and just creation,
making it smaller too. Yeah. Like a photograph is like so easy to make.
Sometimes,
like by comparison, it's just like, even, a lot of like I've gotten to the point where I almost always do need help for my self-portraits now. Like when I was, 20, it was me by myself in like my dorm. But like now I do kind of, often do need someone to help me with rigs or like help me with a light. But it's like one or two people. It's not like 40 people asking me questions, like, which please always ask me questions. But like, it's not like 40 people like asking me questions nonstop for like 3 months, it's like the question fatigue is real, it's just like, oh my gosh. Okay. More like the decision fatigue. That's what I mean. It's just like, it's like, okay, answer a question. And so there's something nice about it just being like, oh, here's 2 or 3 people. And it's like, we can do it in like, we can actually just shoot the thing in like 3 or 4 hours instead of having it be.
And I want to highlight the point of like, some people, there's this idea of like the director is just, it's not as labor intensive or it's not, no, but making decision takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Being the one delegating, holding the vessel, the vision.
Yeah.
Takes so much that you do walk off of that. Maybe you see us like this and this and this and this, but
right. Well,
when we walk
you
away,
can tell when someone's not a good director because I think that's what the job is.
Yes.
Like, if you think the job is to show up on set and ask for a latte, you're not directing. But the real secret is directing and cinematography are both jobs that happen primarily in prep.
Yes.
So if you've done your job well, you are standing around a lot and you are just mostly answering questions and you're thinking very deeply and you're going back to your notes. And, one thing that I do almost immediately after I have a script done is storyboard it. And I don't... I know like some people don't prefer like just shot listing. And for me, the storyboards aren't for me, they're for everybody else.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, I know what the shots are, but like when I draw it, then everybody else knows like this is my ECU, this is my medium, this is how much is in the frame, this is like what I want to see.
It's
and
almost
it just like
this
helps.
is the end game. This is what I'm trying to get
everybody.
to.
It helps those like communication challenges, right? And even, one of my biggest pet peeves is like losing time on set debating where the line is. Like that drives me up the wall because I'm just like, just please stop. Like it's screen direction. Like I don't, and I know that it's a lot harder for other people than it is for me. But I've found that like if I draw it, then I can just say,
here it is.
Here it is. See, this is they're looking that way, right? And it's like, no, this is what we shot before. They're looking that way. They're looking that way.
Continuity.
And then, it's just it's one of the things for me. It's about efficiency. It's about like answering the questions quickly. It's about giving people a visual that makes them comfortable. And, while like questions about the line drive me up the wall, I also understand that everybody is there to help me. And their questions are coming from a place of wanting to do the best job for me and the movie. So I'm trying to figure out like easy ways to put them at ease. So like, here's the picture. See, we're fine. This is the line. We got it. We're cool.
Map.
Yeah.
We have the ceiling.
Right. This is exactly how it was planned. It's fine. We're good. Like, don't worry. I got you, And part of it is that, like, don't worry, I got you. Like,
I was going to just repeat that. You must have heard me in my head. Director, the mantra should be, don't worry, I got you.
Yeah.
And if I don't got you, something went wrong in pre-pro.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Leonora. This has been beautiful. I really do. I look forward to, this is the first time we're meeting, and so I look forward to continuing our connection and I hope we can continue these conversations because I feel like there's so much to share. You have such an amazing experience and background, and would love to hear more about the projects you're manifesting and the magic you're weaving into this reality of ours.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I, again, just honored, and thank you for sharing space with me.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Amazing. It's been very fun.